Hey, welcome to the Camden Otis show, man. Double special episode today. Not only are Camden and I in the same place in Colorado this time, those of you who are regular listeners and viewers of the show, you can probably tell that we're standing next to each other and not on separate screens. But to add to that factor even more, I got a guy that I've known dang near my entire life hanging out with us on the show today, Mr. Ben Godfrey, whose dad I always refer to as my other dad, and Ben and his brothers were always my brothers I never had. Ben, is so good to see you today, man.
Good to see you too, also.
So it's hard for me to come up with a question that I don't know, but I can come up with a question that everybody else doesn't know, and I think that's what's going to make it a lot more interesting and fun. Is where did now and you told me this years ago, the serial entrepreneur, and that's what you are. Where did that spirit? What was the catalyst? What was the thing that when did it start? Because I have some memories, backyard adventures that we had. But where did it start for you, really, from your point of view, not my point of view?
I didn't realize it at the time, but now looking back, I spent a lot of time with my grandfather, my dad's dad, and he had freedom and flexibility to pick us up, take us around, do whatever he wanted to do that day. It's because he had started his own business. He worked a long time as an employee, and then towards the end of it, he kind of semi-retired from that and went on his own, and that's where he had freedom and income. And I didn't realize that that had played a role in where I would be going, but I saw that freedom. And so then my dad was an entrepreneur most all of my life, a couple of times with a job, but pretty much the rest of the time he's been self-employed. And so the freedom is what I wanted. And so that's what I started businesses mainly for freedom.
Did you go through a rough few years where that freedom wasn't there? Because I think a lot of entrepreneurs get into it with that idea for it, and then you realize it's like I don't got a boss, so I don't got to work, 9 to 5, but then you wind up working 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or something like that. Especially on a farm, I feel like you could really that the extra time and there's always something to do that could really erode that freedom. How did you find that balance?
My wife told me when my daughter was 2 years old, she said, "Your daughter doesn't know you because you're working so much." That wasn't the father I wanted to be, so I made some changes. What I realized, and this is kind of an entrepreneurial curse, an entrepreneur can do anything, so they try to do everything, and then they wind up with not with the lifestyle they wanted. And so that was my problem. I wasn't great at any of them, but I could do all of the different tasks. And so once I hired someone that was an integrator, pretty much a get it done person, that changed my life in a really, really good way. So I want to say that was probably my second business. It was probably 25 years ago, I'd say. And that's where it started. Pretty much building a team, getting people that are better at the job than I am, and then I can get out of the way, and then I can do the part that I like to do. They do the other part. And the other thing is I was procrastinating some of the things I don't like to do to the point that it was hurting the business. And these people, they just loved doing those tasks. So we all were happy.
How did you see that? Because one of the things that I found with working with entrepreneurs over the years is they know that they kind of have this feeling, but it's still my baby, and I can't trust somebody. What was it your wife saying, "Hey, dude," poking you a couple of times as y'all said goodnight, saying you need to change something, or did you start to see it also?
I knew I was working hard. The excuse I would tell her is when you're taking off on an airplane, you go full throttle till you get up to idle speed, where you get up to a certain altitude and just pull back a little bit and cruise along. That was kind of my rationalization for working so much. But really, I base it all on freedom. I wanted freedom. I didn't have freedom, even though I didn't have a boss. I was busy all the time. And so as soon as I handed some of that off to some other people, that bought lots of time. And I went from working every day except for Sunday, and then I would work about 3 days a week, and the team at the office would handle the rest of it. And once I tasted that freedom, there was no going back. I think the entrepreneurs generally they say, "Well, I can do it better. I just don't have the time to teach them. They won't do as good of a job," and that's probably vanity. And really you just need to let go and let somebody else do some of it. Maybe it won't be exactly as good as what you would have done on that task. There's a good chance it might be better because the tasks you're going to hand off are the ones you don't like to do. And then the other side of it is it frees you up to do the things you are good at. So the potential slight loss you have from them not doing quite as good as you would have done is far, far made up by you doing what you're really good at and what you really enjoy, and your quality of life goes up as well.
Looking back, do you still agree with that the airplane analogy there? Do you think that you have to for the let's just to pick an arbitrary number, first year or two, do you think that you have to dive in like that, or do you think it's possible to hit that balance from the beginning?
It all depends on your finances when you start. If you start with no money, you have nothing else but your sweat to make up for it. But if you have other people's money or if you have your own money, something to get started, it also depends on the margin on your business. If it's real high margin, it does take as much money to get it going.
Mhm.
But yes, I still think about everybody's got to work really hard at the very beginning to where they can hire an employee, and they probably don't think they can afford that employee, but they should hire it anyway. And then that's where it really starts rolling. Once you start leveraging others, that buys you time to make better decisions, gives you time to think also to make better decisions. So yeah, I still think you have to pour it on. How long, it depends on you, how quickly you're willing to train somebody else, how well you train somebody else, and what your type of business is.
Depends on if you have a wife at home and some kids running around too, probably.
I do have a wife at home, and I have some children.
Well, it reminds me of, and if you haven't met him, I recommend you look him up. Is Kevin Cunningham. I have a feeling that you'll have that same feeling when you listen to him talk that I do. It sounds like one of our uncles. He's a Texas guy, business guy, and one of the things that he has attributed to his business success, and I don't remember how many millions of dollars of business he had that went, oops, because he was trying to do it all. And now how he does what he calls thinking on the business. And there's so much to be said for that. And that's such a true lesson that, man, if you ain't thinking on the business and you're just going in the business and doing the business, the old working in versus working on the business also is another way of putting it. You're going to suffer both in the business and in life, I think. So when you learned that lesson and started to apply it, what was the first thing you did?
The first task I wanted to get rid of was bookkeeping. So we barely had a business, and I had an assistant, secretary, office manager. There was not much of an office, and there wasn't a whole lot of secretary work. Basically, they did some bookkeeping, answered the phones. That was the first thing I handed off. And once I saw that somebody else could make payroll for us and somebody else could answer all the calls and I could do other things, I want to say it was almost instant. Within the first 6-8 months of the very first business I had somebody help. And I've always had an assistant of some sort all the way through.
But what did you do? Because you said, you alluded to it earlier, where you were working 6 days a week. And then when you started to hand things off, you were back to 3 days a week.
There was some time. There was definitely some time in between those.
Yeah.
When I hired the first person, there was bookkeeping. The second person was operations.
Mm-hmm.
Those two pretty much were the bulk of what I needed. I had a salesperson occasionally, but not all the time. Most of the time I did the sales. I would do kind of directional, this is the direction the company's going. And then my operations guy, he was really, really good. And between he and a bookkeeper, that's what bought the 3 days a week. And then I really realized I liked being on the farm more than I liked being at work. And so I made changes to that direction.
So is that what you did? I'm drilling on you here because I'm still not hearing the answer to the question I'm asking. Maybe I'll rephrase it. Now I've handed off these things X hours, we'll say 12 hours a week, right? I've handed off 12 hours a week.
Sure.
What did you do with that 12 hours? Was it planting crops? Was it chasing chickens? Was it sitting and reading to the girls? What was it? What'd you do?
I see. So the first, I'll back up a little bit before we go to the 3 days a week because it was a lot of plowing crops. But to get the business going, it started off. The bookkeeper would handle a lot of details, and then the operation guy would handle details, and then I would do more higher end work. A lot of it was sales. A lot of it was business development, finding new opportunities. At the time, it was a commercial construction company, and we were doing one type of work. So I would look for some other similar work to do. So it was more sales and business development is what I spent that extra time on. Once those got going, we were busier. Then the operations guy and the bookkeeper, and then we had kind of a right-hand guy in the shop. And they took that, and then I was able to travel a little more. So the family and I, we would travel. We'd spend 3 days a week on the farm. And yes, I was farming with horses and enjoying life. That was what I did once we got to that point.
How did you deal with we already kind of talked about passing off the different tasks. How did you deal with that shift to leadership? Did that come naturally for you?
No, I don't think I am the best of leaders. I'm kind of a salesman that making do. I really had top notch operations guys that I could kind of give a direction and they could just handle it. And so then I didn't have to be as much of a leader. I still probably failed in that area. I could have been a better leader, built a bigger company. But again, my route, I was trying to get to freedom. And I wasn't trying to build an empire. I was just trying to have a great life. And so anything that took me off the goal of freedom, I would stop, reevaluate, and see how I could change it.
One thing that stands out to me as you said that is it takes me back to, my time working on the farm with you. And one of the things that I learned so much was when started working the dairy, you basically handed it off and said, here's your basics, call me if anything's wrong. And as much as a lot of people would look at that like it's not leading, in a lot of ways, that's the best leadership because it gives the person the freedom to go in and learn through the processes like that instead of getting their hand held the entire time. And it allows you to step away as a leader. Whereas I think of a lot of other people want to micromanage. That's where they start. They start at the other end of the spectrum. And because of that, they can never fully let go. And then you're not getting any of that extra capabilities or time with your kids or anything like that you're looking for. You wind up just managing and watching somebody do the job that you're trying to hire somebody to do instead of going off and doing something else. Was that something that you consciously looked at, or was that more you didn't have, like you said, you didn't feel like you had that leadership bone, and so that was the way you approached it? Because I could say as somebody, I worked there for a month, but that was something that, as I guess technically an employee, maybe for a month, I don't know, but I felt like that system worked really well. And that's something that I've taken as a leader, coaching rugby, all those different things of giving that type of a freedom. Was that a conscious effort, or was that more just what you thought, what came to mind right away?
You were a different, we called them interns. We had interns come from all over the world. You were motivated, you had character, and I knew you. So it was a whole lot easier to hand over my livelihood to you because I gave you the basics, you paid attention, you wanted to be there. Not every intern was like that. All of them ultimately did have that same freedom, just not as quickly as you did. But yes, I wanted them to, once they know what to do, I really don't need to stand over them. There's a few key things in the farming, in that particular, in the dairy, some cleanliness things that are really important. And the rest of it is not quite as important. So you can give them some flexibility to have their own style of doing it.
How did you find? Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, please go ahead.
How did you apply that in the earlier businesses in construction there?
Most of the people I hired in construction were better than I was the day they started. Like I said, I was a salesman. Mm-hmm. And so when I was out there trying to train them how to do it, most of them could just ask me to step aside and do it better than I could right then and there during the training. Not always, but I tried to hire those kind of people. They're people that just see how things go together, and it's just easy for them to do construction. Mm-hmm. And so I hired those kind of people, and it was a blessing for me to get out of the way. It was frustrating them to watch me try and do it.
Yeah, I've been that guy. Let me show you how to do it. No, 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 sir. Stop. I got it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the biggest issues that all business owners have is finding the right people. How did you, and maybe a little bit of a story of progression, but how did you and how do you find the right people for your business now to be part of your team?
Um, I'll answer from back then. Now my goal is a little different. Back then, I would look for people who already had a job and try and hire them away, as opposed to people that were looking for work.
Hmm.
Usually, if they're good, they have a job.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean if you don't have a job, you're not good. But I really found that the best people were employed because they wanted to be and because they were really good. So that was my technique. If I found someone that was unsatisfied with the job they had a similar skill set to go work for me, I would offer them. Sometimes it'd take a year to get them to realize they could change and let go of what they were doing. And then they'd come over. And that's how I got my operations guy. That's how I got my best bookkeeper. A lot of them just hiring good people that were dissatisfied where they were.
That's a great technique because I've put together some proposals over the years, and it always cracks me up because, and these were contracts where I collect all these people and get them to sign letters of intent and all these sort of things, and then the government will take 6 months, a year to award the contract, and then they fuss at us as the performer of the contract because that person who said they would take the job, 6 months ago or a year ago, when they requested the proposal, is no longer available. So yeah, there's a lot to be said for that, because if that person's good enough to have a job and keep working, then might be the right person on your team and might be one of those fit things. Which leads me to another thing that I always work with clients on is that culture. Were you consciously developing a culture, or was it just who you are became the culture?
You know what? I don't think I even knew of a business culture, that whole concept back then. The bulk of this was many years ago. We changed, I guess we've reinvented ourselves 3 or 4 times now. So there was a commercial construction, there was equipment, and there's been farming, and then now real estate. But I don't know that I was aware of a culture at the time. I did want everybody to get along. I wanted everybody to be happy in the job they were in. And I wanted to give them the skills and the freedom to do their job. So we would have regular meetings and make sure that everybody's on the same page. This is the direction I want us to go. Make sure operations thinks we can do it. Make sure that it wasn't really a CFO position, but she was really aware of what we had in the accounts to make sure everything would work together. And then we would just move forward. And then I liked to think that I was rewarding to them. I think almost all employers think they're good employers, and if you ask their employees, it may not get the same answer. But I sure strove for that.
Did you, you talked a lot about, feeling like you're a good salesman and having the skills there. Did you approach leadership in that way, like selling the vision? Is that kind of your approach?
Probably everything is my approach in sales, right? To my wife, to my kids, to everything. And it wasn't deliberate. It's just some people are more sales minded, and when they get excited about something, they start selling it, even if it's just where we're going for dinner. So yes, I think it just by default that was happening.
I love that, because that's one of the things, people think of when we think of sales, we think of the used car salesman. And I love the dinner example, because I always like to bring that up of, it's like you're selling ideas all the time when you're trying to coordinate with your friends, where you're going for dinner that night, what kind of movie you're going to watch, whatever it is. There's a sales process going on where you're trying to understand their desires, the other people's desires, and how you can make that all fit towards that common goal. So I definitely love that approach.
Yeah, we're all in sales, just some of us don't know it.
Yeah, yeah. So each of these businesses that you've had, and I'll circle back around to talk about those in a bit. But what was it that got you into the first one, and Yeah, let's just stick with that rather than compounding a multiple choice question going on here. What was it that got you into that first business that said, "Yeah, this is what I can do"?
It was more of an opportunity. I was working. I had one adult job. As soon as we got married, I needed to finish college, and so I took a job and I was selling oil for gasoline and oil for a company. And so I would drive all day long, and then at at night I'd go to night school to finish college. And that was about a year and a half. And a couple of people in that, my coworkers, one coworker in that company, wanted to start an advertising business. They said they wanted me to be a part of it, so I left that company, started that advertising business. Saw it was not going to work. Too many partners, not enough workers. There were four people involved, and two of us worked, and two didn't. So I handed over my shares of that business to the other worker and said, "Good luck to you." And then I went back to my former employer and said, "Look, I just need to get out of college. I need any kind of job just to get out of college." He said, "Well, he had a money partner at the time, and he said, "Well, we don't really know much about employees and how that works, but we'll give you a commission, 20% commission of whatever you sell." So basically, it wasn't, "I see this business opportunity." It was just, "I need something to do." The guy said, "Here's something you can sell." I started selling that. He would give me 20% of the profits. Well, sometimes we needed to buy tools, so that ate into the profits. So I said, "Does that mean I own 20% of the tools?" He said, "Yes, for that matter, you really own 20% of the company." He was a very generous guy, and we grew that company up together. And eventually, he offered me to buy out. I want to say I bought out all of it. He offered me to buy out all of his shares, and I bought all but 10%. I told him I wanted him to stay as a partner, and that first purchase cost almost nothing compared to the last 10% that I bought out because the company had grown. So it wasn't that I saw an opportunity. I needed something. I worked in it. It started growing. He kept his day job, and I did all of the work on the pump. And it was gasoline pumps. We would buy bulk truckload of gasoline pumps, repair them, and sell them. And that was our first business. And then that one evolved into commercial construction on gas stations. Same partner, same customers, different product. And that's what we had for about 13 years.
Did you see a pivot? Because that's a really good business lesson in that you stayed in the same industry, but did something different within the industry. And there's a lot of lessons and books behind me that talk about that. How did you? Was it just another one of those? I see something, and you kind of went to the opportunity, or was it more forethought to it?
No, it was almost a forced scenario. We were buying used gasoline pumps from, let's say, Exxon. Exxon would say, "We're going to do an upgrade. We're going to pull out these pumps. We're going to put in brand new pumps." Well, that was when all the credit card readers came out. Our business was buying used pumps, reconditioning them, and selling them to mom and pop. Well, all of a sudden, all the oil companies started incentivizing mom and pop to buy brand new credit card readers. So our business just almost shut down. We started exporting a few to Thailand, but that was not sustainable for us. It was too small, not enough. So when I saw that that was going down, I needed to do something else. The same partner that I had at that point, I think he was still a majority partner at that time. He said, "Well, what about this image work, commercial construction on gas stations?" And I said, "I don't know what it is." He said, "Well, meet me at a store. I'll show you what it is." And again, he helped me get going in that one. And that's really what took off. The gas pumps, we went for about 3 years, and then we changed into image work. So if it was a Texaco station that wanted to change to a Citgo, they'd call us. We'd remove everything that identified it as one and put up new to identify as the other. And that was the bulk of that was that business. And that one was another 10 years with a little overlap. And that pivot came out of necessity. And thank goodness for the partner who had the insight.
Did you have any trouble identifying those different paths? Like, and what I mean by that was, it seems like looking for those different pivots that there could have been different directions you could have gone. Still in that same vein, did you have trouble picking the right path, or was it kind of like out of necessity, like you said, where you just saw what was in front of you, made that decision, and then kind of built on it from there?
It was the easiest transition. I already had a Rolodex of all those people. I already had trust with all those people. when the guy said, well, here's something else you could do. And by the way, it looks even better than what you were doing. And I had the same customer and they already trusted me. It was the fastest and easiest transition that I knew of. There might have been some other product I could have sold to him, but this was something my crews, my equipment was already well suited for. So it made it a pretty easy transition.
I want to dive into that business lesson just a bit, because this happens to businesses all the time, and many of them miss the indicators. What was the indicator, or what did you see? What was the feeling, however you want to describe it, that was like, I mean, was it a number on, in February of 2007, you saw a number on the calendar and went, ooh, or what was it?
That made me change?
Yeah, that you saw this one going down and you went, oh shoot, man, I got to find something else. What was that threshold? Or because and Camden's talked about this several times, the sunk cost fallacy. Oh man, this is it. I got to stick to this. I got to, let's up our media campaign. Let's up this. We need to get more sales. We need to hit the streets, because this, in that sort of sense. And you didn't fall for that. And that's the kind of, I guess, lesson I'm trying to extract for our listeners to hear. All right, I was watching the numbers, I was watching the calendar, I was watching the price of whatever it may have been. How did you know that this was diving?
Well, like I said, the incentivizing from the oil companies for those new gas pumps, it really made it the best decision for the mom and pop to buy the brand new. So I could see that I was going against, I guess I was going against oil companies, and they had deeper pockets than I do. There's no way I was going to change this technology changeover. It was happening. And so I looked for how I could still make money in the same deal. And I saw there just wasn't enough revenue for me. So I try to always have a plan A, B, and C. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. If that doesn't work, we're going to do this. If that doesn't work, we're going to do that. And my plan A was absolutely failing. And so I knew it was failing, and I could see timelines, how much money we needed to keep our business open. And I could see that was shrinking down. And when I started looking for what else I could do, I mentioned it to my partner, and he said, what about this? So I guess when you're looking for something, you realize you've got to make a change. I wasn't super picky. I needed to do something, and that something turned out to be great for us.
Because looking back on something like, putting credit card stations at the pumps at gas stations, I think it's real, for us three to talk about it now, it's pretty easy to say, okay, well, yeah, that obviously, that's the future. Did you at all, I guess, how did you reach that decision? Was it really intuitive to you, or was there a little bit of resistance? Like, oh no, this is going to be a fad. This is just going to pass, because that's why I think a lot of businesses double back down onto things. It's because they look at a new technology or, whatever intervention's happening, and they say, oh, that's just a fad. Looking back at credit cards, I think it's pretty easy for us to all say that's not a fad. But how did you identify that in the moment?
Yeah, I really was skeptical, because the convenience stores, they make their money on the inside sales. Their margins are inside sales. Their gasoline, they barely make a few pennies. So it's just not very profitable for the gasoline. And so if you and I, all the time, I put my credit card in the machine and don't go inside at all. And so I thought, well, this is a fad. Nobody's going to do this. I don't see why they would even want to do this, because they lower their income. And so I thought, no, this isn't going to take. Well, that was my opinion. The reality was my phone was not ringing. When I'd call and say, hey, what about these pumps you're interested in? No, we decided to buy new. That's what made the change. It didn't matter what I thought. It mattered what was happening. And they were buying new pumps and not buying our used pumps. So we had to make a change.
Was that hard at all to swallow? Not that you don't strike me as a very prideful person, but was it hard to swallow the pride at all in that? Because I think, we talk about, the business as your baby. A lot of the times it's kind of hard to, gosh, in that analogy, I don't know, you throwing the baby away and getting a new one or what, but it's kind of hard to, set that to the side and say, hey, I was wrong on this, and, find that new path forward. Was that difficult for you at all?
No, I like change. It's entrepreneurship. I was doing something. I kind of figured that out. I knew what it was like. and this is an opportunity to do something different and learn. I love learning, and so I enjoyed it. I say I don't want to use the baby as, but to change from one to another, it's exciting. I think everybody should reinvent themselves at least 3 times in their life.
Yeah, the baby metaphor doesn't really work there.
No. Yeah, probably not. Probably not. And yeah, so I'm laughing that you did not think of that number 3 because you are in your at least third. But what I want to know is how did you know it was time to change? You know, everybody talks about well, there's a lot of business discussion now that's a little bit more prevalent. That is, you know, begin with the end in mind, or what's your exit strategy? You know, the entrepreneur doing the pitch, and you know, one of the slides in their pitch is my exit strategy is this. I'm going to guess, just because I've got some insider information, you didn't start any of these businesses with this is how I get out of this business.
Not until the one I'm in now. All the rest of them, they just happened. And so I saw opportunity. I jumped into it and rode it until something else made more sense. And when I was younger, I would start a business and not go far enough to get any gain from it. And then I start another one. And I think that's a problem that entrepreneurs have is we see opportunity, but you don't really make any money until you develop that opportunity. And so that I realized that I would want to have 3 or 4 businesses going simultaneously, and none of them extremely profitable. And I was really busy. And so once I started focusing, then it started working better. Well, as I got older, I focused more and more, and I realized my ideal business is a high ticket item with a high margin with almost no employees. And that's what we're doing now.
How did you make that leap? Because that's a great, I mean, I think most people aspire to that. I'm drawing a blank. Recurring, not provisional income.
Passive income.
Passive, thank you. The other P word, provisional, passive, you know, they're almost the same, right? How did that shift happen? Was it the more family time? Was it the more adventure that's less business? What was the writing on the wall?
When we were selling the farm, I had no time. I had very little money. I had good net worth, but no cash and no time. And I wanted those 3 forms of freedom. Everybody hears about money freedom, financial freedom, and then they hear about time freedom. But somebody else introduced me to the idea of location freedom. I hadn't thought about that, to be able to do what you want, wherever you want. And when I evaluated different businesses, I know I was not going to farm again. At first, we thought we were going to sell our farm, move to Tennessee, and farm again. And then over time, I said, all right, we're not going to farm, not enough margin, too much difficulty in lifestyle, and my children are getting older. And so then I said, well, I'll start an equipment rental business. It had it had too many employees. That's why I didn't do it. Had profit, had a lot of things. I loved equipment. But I knew that if the mechanic didn't show up for work, I was in a bind because I'm not a mechanic. So then I said, well, and I had a couple of mentors pouring into me. They said, well, you really should do some type of real estate investment. And so that's what we sold the farm, subdivided the farm out, and moved into Tennessee and bought real estate. And the main reason we did that is for freedom. We wanted freedom, and that gave it to us. So now we can travel and do things that we enjoy.
Have you struggled at all with that new freedom? Have you struggled at all to not go start that other project?
Yes. When it first happened, people ask you, well, what do you do? And you say, well, I'm retired. But it's like the end. And it was very disappointing that this is all there is. You know, this is retired. And it was not mentally stimulating. It almost feels like as a man, you need to be growing or doing something. And so I continue to buy properties now to keep myself engaged because it's enjoyable. But I've never really been a depressed person, but I was disappointed, to say the least. If this is retirement and you just sit around and you don't have to do anything, and you're not really growing. That learning and growing I really like. So then I would just pick something and go start learning about it. Usually it'd be a different form of real estate. And then here lately, I've kind of changed over my focus to helping my children launch, and then also helping other young people to launch. I call it a launch plan. And matter of fact, I'd love to get y'all's input and anybody that's listening's input. What do 16 to 20-year-old people need to learn, skill sets, books, etc., to be able to launch better? So many people, they either, like our children are homeschooled, and there's so many homeschoolers that have this great plan and curriculum to get them up to high school and graduate high school, and they're articulate, they have good character, and they have all these skill sets, and then they turn 18 and there's no curriculum anymore, and they flounder. And I see that, and I see a lot of great people that are floundering. And so I thought, well, we need some kind of launch plan for that. So that's what I'm working on now.
I love that. I love that. And there's so many things to that, well, the first one that comes to my mind is Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and talking about that same sort of thing. And yes, the academics of universities and colleges is extremely important for that broader understanding and learning. And if you're going to go into, I think, what's called, in some sense, a professional career, the engineer, the doctor, the lawyer, that sort of sense, where, those books that are down on the bottom shelf that I can't get rid of because I don't want to throw that tie away, but I'll never look at again, engineering something or other and those sort of things. But the rest of the world, the entrepreneurs, the tradesmen, all those don't do that and don't need that. And that's not existent. And I think that's a great problem set. And then I'll also throw in Camden's project with Know Your Tribe, because that's exactly what Know Your Tribe is, although it's focused on, and I'll call you out. Anybody in this ditch, I'm calling you like you are, those kids, when they graduate college and they get that job and they go, crap, is this all there is? This is what I'm going to do until I die, till I retire or die. Is this it? And how do you do that? So I think that's a great, man, there's a huge need for that.
And what, thinking about it, if you had to pick one thing, I think so much of it goes back to whether you want to call it lifelong learning, growth mindset, whatever, just some sort of approach with that. Because what I experienced myself, and then what I've seen with a lot of people now with Know Your Tribe, and then also I got a little head start with Know Your Tribe because I got to coach a lot of rugby. So I was around a lot of high schoolers, a lot of college kids. And what I would see would be they set these goals, whether, like you said, Ben, graduate high school, and then it's kind of like, okay, go, done. And then there's never really, okay, how do we move forward from there? It's okay, go get that job. Okay, done. Okay, how do you improve at that job? How do you keep moving? And I think part of it, and actually I'd be really interested to hear what you think from the more homeschool perspective. I think part of it is that, this is going to sound like I'm just knocking school entirely, but it's not what I mean. It's just, you get conditioned to kind of a fast and famine type, or is that the right word? Feast and famine. There we go. Feast and famine type of mentality, to where you have your semester and you go in and you're learning, and then you're working your ass off that last 2 weeks to get in there and, pass those final exams. And then you're off for 3 weeks. No more thought about it. And then you're back and you do it again. And then you're off for 2 months. And you kind of have this, like, where you hit those goals and you just stop. And I think that's such a weird conditioning that so many people get into, rather than looking for that next goal and trying to continue that growth. And so, I just want to throw that over to you, Ben. What do you think? Because it seems like, talking from the homeschool perspective, you still kind of see a little bit of that type of a mentality. So it's plainly not just the school year and the fact that they get summer breaks. Where do you think that comes from?
I know the curriculum that homeschoolers, there's a lot of freedom. You can add all kinds of things. Like our girls, they had to read Dave Ramsey. They had to go through a land flipping business course as part of it. Pretty much, if I think of something, oh yeah, they should learn that, and I put that in their curriculum. And so they have to read a lot of different books and understand a lot of concepts. But that's the curriculum I create. What I don't have for them, once they finish high school, I don't have another curriculum for them. And I think that's, like you said, college kids, the same thing. A lot of them go to college just because that they don't really know what they should do after high school. So they go to college and hope they figure it out in the next 4 or 5 years, often incurring some significant debt and not really moving themselves along. I know some guys, this one particular guy, he's a partner on some of our projects, and He was 18 years old, said, I don't see any point in college because I don't want to be a doctor, lawyer, accountant, or engineer. And so if I'm not going to be one of those, what I need. So he just got into insurance sales, worked really hard, saved his money, rolled it into, he saw an opportunity in real estate and started buying real estate, multifamily. And now he's 26 and he could retire 10 times over. Just he created his own path. And now that we look at it, he says, well, I never went to college. And he almost felt like maybe he was a little less than because he didn't go to college, but he's done phenomenal. So he was homeschooled as well. I think not having a program or a plan, and a lot of parents, I mean, what do we tell our kids? Go to college, because we don't really know what else you do. Go to college, and then after that, hope you get a job and good luck. And so I don't have an answer for it, but I tell you, I'm diving into it to figure it out. I have 2 college graduates and 2 just starting college. And we do college online because they can do it in 2.5 years and get the piece of paper, because that's all it is. They're not going to be doctors and lawyers. That's not their goal. So we're getting them a piece of paper, and it's mostly as an insurance in case some reason they ever need to get a job, or that I can't create some business or help them create a business, and they actually have to be an employee. That's a barrier. It opens that barrier of entry where they can at least apply for some jobs that require a 4-year degree.
It's great. And speaking of lessons, what's looking back on all the business struggles and frustrations you had, what would be the one thing that early on smacked you in the forehead with like a 2x4 that you still go back to every day and go, oh, don't, or I got to make sure I do, whatever that is? What's that lesson? What's that life business lesson?
I think about this pretty often. If you're just living life and you're not being purposeful you're just kind of going along. If you don't plan on what you're doing, life just happens and it goes right by. And so I realize that I am a product of the 5 people I spend the most time with. And so if there's a goal that I have, I want to tweak those 5 people that it leads me towards that goal. And so that's what I find I'm doing. And that's probably the main thing. Each business I started was because of a good contact. Pretty much every good thing in my life was somehow or another because of someone I knew. And so those 5 people, I continuously, I don't want to say upgrade it, but adjust who I'm spending time with to get me towards the direction I'm trying to go.
You mentioned the upgrade there, and I think that's the interesting thing when people, talk about that is there's this issue where it's like you're growing with people, and then they may not be part of that next chapter, and it's really difficult because it really mixes business with friendship and those type of things, where you have these relationships on a personal level, but then it might not be making sense for the business, might be holding you back, all of those different types of things. I guess what's your thoughts on moving forward with that without cutting off relationships, without leaving people behind, because we all want to bring those people with us. That's why they're our friends, because we want them to have the same kind of success that we want. What was your approach to that?
So it's the 5 people you spend the most time with. So you don't necessarily have to cut off the others. You just spend more time with the ones that you're striving to.
Love that.
Yeah. It reminds me of Marshall Goldsmith. One of his books, I just love the title of it, is "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." And that there's so much truth to that, because I can't remember who the other person was, but if you're hanging out with drug dealers, guess what? You're probably going to end up in that realm of drug dealers. If you're hanging out with people that are buckling down, figuring out business, they're in the real estate business. I mean, I would even say that the lesson here would be, if you want to go do X, want to get into real estate, then you ought to start having cups of coffee with people that are successful in real estate, as opposed to hanging out with your engineer buddies. It's just just kind of throwing that out there as an action step for you. What's happening next? Since you've been doing the real estate stuff for 3 years, 4 years now.
Can't remember. 3 years.
3 years. what's next? Because, and you and I have joked about this, I remember in the past too. God ain't making any more land.
That's right.
So what's next real estate industry?
What's the next thing I'm going to do?
Or yeah, next thing you or even like an industry trend that is coming. Is it I don't know.
If you have the secret answer on that, maybe hold it. We'll get it off the podcast so we
Yeah,
can
really.
discussion.
Monetize that answer. Yeah. I don't think my crystal ball is any better than y'all's, but things that interest me that I'm going to pursue, I hope they work out. I really like land. I've always liked land. It doesn't meet some of the parameters that I normally buy. I normally buy for cash flow, but I like the land business. I like subdividing. My dad did it. I did a little bit of it, and it's always worked out real well for us. I wouldn't do a real big project right now because of the way the economy's sitting, but I still see we need to build more houses. They've got to be built somewhere, and so I think there'll be some opportunity in doing some land deals. And my main thing is to incorporate my children into this land business so that at any time, if they decide they want to, they could do it on their own without me. And so we're working. I have two different daughters right now that have said they're ready. And so we'll be starting land business.
You mentioned, what you're interested in and it sounds like that's really been your part of your theme of, your entrepreneur journey is just following the interest there. Was there one business or one aspect of a business that you didn't have that interest in and you just felt disillusioned with it and kind of lost that fire a little bit?
Yes, the advertising business that I had for that little bit of time with those partners. It was not a high ticket item. It was high margin, but it was not high ticket. So this guy, I was just thinking of him yesterday. He was kind of a mentor, and I brought to him this really big deal, pitched this big. To me, it was really big. In today's dollars, it was probably not that big deal, but it felt big to me back then. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, here I am pitching this big deal to him. He's got lots of money. This is not a problem. He could stroke the check for this easily. And he said, Ben, I want to be honest with you. He said, it takes the same time to do a big deal as a little deal. He said, I only have time for big deals. And I thought that was a big deal. They just gave me a perspective of what big was for him. So I did have a disillusionment with that business, the advertising business, because it was $30, $60 sales. And it was the same time to get to the person, get in front of the person, talk to the person for a $30 to $60 sale. I had to have a lot of sales. And so I could see the writing on the wall of that. Even though it was a good idea, there wasn't a way that we found to automate that process yet because it was a new concept. And so, I felt real good handing that off and going doing something else.
Would you still say you were interested in it? Like that, like the way I'm thinking is like, we're still fascinated with the idea of the business and being obsessed with that. Because I think that's one of the things that I've definitely experienced with some of my businesses to where it's like, I can think of, a few different ideas I've had. Some of them went along further than others that I look back on. And it's like, if you ask me about it, especially if it's over a beer or something, I'm still telling you it's a great idea. And I'm not spending any time on it because I don't see the path forward as much, but there's still that huge interest in the idea there. Did you have that still?
Oh, sure. Anytime the salesman in me, if I could describe what that business was, I would describe it in a way that probably motivates you to think, oh, that was a great idea.
Great idea.
But the reality is, though, my goal goes back to freedom. It was not going to buy freedom because I had to spend too much time to get a little bit of money when I could spend the same time and get a lot of money. So I just kept adjusting the dial to where the right amount of time to get the right amount of money to get the right amount of freedom. That was my goal.
One thing that you just had me thinking on there, and I think entrepreneurs, and I think I've fallen into this trap myself, is you talk about like selling the vision for the business, selling the business idea, is you're selling yourself on it a lot. And then you can kind of get into, like the drinking the Kool-Aid type of moment to where maybe you shouldn't be in business anymore. Whether there's a different opportunity that you should be pursuing, there's something, a negative impact in the industry, whatever it is. How did you prevent yourself from selling yourself on the idea a little too much? Was it I have a feeling, did you use the wife test for that at all?
God gave me a really good wife for my personality. And so I would sell it and she said, I'm not buying it. No. And then after a little while, if I still had some good angles for it and it made sense, then she would go through. But you wouldn't believe how many business plans my poor wife has been through. Years and years. And it used to be, she said, and I told her, I said, honey, all you have to do is just listen to it. Odds are I'm not going to do it anyway. Well, let's just talk it through. And so once she changed her mindset that she didn't have to dissuade me from all these ideas, she just had to brainstorm with me. She became a teammate, and she, you don't want to say the devil's advocate because she was on my team, but she definitely took that side of it, of how it might not work. And, I was, of course, it's always going to work. And so that was how we decided what to do and what not to do. Even still, every business I've ever started, at the beginning of it, she thought was a bad idea. And every business that's ever been successful, at the beginning of it, she thought it was a bad idea. And then I think what that does is it puts it back on me as the man. My wife is looking for me to provide and so not to make foolish decisions. So she would say, what about this, this, and this? And I would consider those things. And then I'd go back to her. And then if I had a good enough answer for her, she'd say, well, whatever you decide. And boy, then I would go back and triple check my numbers because now she's put her full faith in me.
Yep.
And usually that always really made my decisions better.
I love that. That's one of the things I've been thinking about a lot, how people fall into these really, really rough patterns that they don't realize. They don't realize that the business idea might not be there. And it's because if you think about it in like the sales terms, you're getting, that win is getting somebody to buy your idea. And the problem is when you have a lot of people who mean well and want to support you and they just love your idea over and over and over again, you never get to do what you're talking about, which is going back and triple checking that. And so a lot of the time you need that little bit of a pushback, that devil's advocate, whatever you want to call it, because that's going to make the idea so much better rather than falling into that trap where it's like win, 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 win. And then it just blows up in your face because you never actually polished the idea in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. And that kind of partnership, I think every business owner, every person really needs that kind of partnership where there's a risk balance, right? There's the high risk taker and the not so, I wouldn't say risk averse, but just in that sort of sense, that's a great strength and asset to have. But I'm not going to count that as my lesson learned for today and what I learned, because I'm going to go back to, because it's such a fundamental foot stomper, slap the desk, whatever you want to call it, lesson for business is know your numbers and always be looking for opportunities. Not necessarily to toss it all away, but if your eyes are open and your head's up and you're looking for it, then you're going to see it. And if you know what your numbers are and you're watching the trend and what's going on and where your cash flow is, and you see an opportunity or not, or you can make a much more informed decision as opposed to, no, we just need to put more in the advertising budget. We just need to put more in the advertising. We need to get some more salespeople. We need to spend more time on it. And you can't sell what people ain't buying. So make sure that you're aware of those numbers. And that for me is what I got a great reminder of today. Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
Talking about the same customer pivot in the beginning there, I think that's such a big lesson because so often when you hit that wall in your business, whatever that is, you look to throw out the baby with the bathwater. That baby metaphor works, but instead, so often it's like you should look for the opportunity that's right nearby in that same industry with the same customers. Because like you said, you already have the trust, you already understand the market. All of those different things give you such a big advantage versus stopping completely and shifting to a whole nother area because it's, that shiny object, that new idea, whatever it is. But by making that big pivot, you're opening yourself up to so much more risk. So I really love that of pivoting inside the same customer market.
Yeah. How about you? What'd you learn?
I think I've got room for 2 more guys in my circle of 5. I think you 2 guys would be a good fit.
Awesome, man. I appreciate that. How can folks get in touch with you, find you, learn what that next real estate deal might be part of that team?
Sure, sure. My email is probably the best. It's godfrey.rei@gmail.com.
Awesome, man. Ben, this has been great. Always good to hang out with you, and man, it's like brings back so many memories. I won't even get into the stuff we did as kids.
Yeah,
There's a whole nother show going on,
that's right.
and a different theme, I think. But I will say, I can't tell you how much we appreciate your time today and carving out some of that time with us. Camden, you go ahead and run us out.
All right. Thank you all again for listening to today's episode of the Cam and Otis Show. A special thanks to our guest, Uncle Ben Godfrey, for joining us today. And of course, to our sponsor, Tribe and Purpose. Find your tribe, find your purpose. You can learn more at findyourpurpose.coach. You can check out full episodes of the Cam and Otis Show on our YouTube page at the Cam and Otis Show. And then you can also get a full archive of our episodes at www.thecamandotisshow.buzzsprout.com. And you can always follow us and check it out on Instagram and Facebook. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next time.